In our last show, we discussed China's lack of training or rules of engagement. But let's now focus on the seamanship and navigational skills of the Filipino captain and crew of the BRP Sulian, led by their commanding officer, Captain Jomark Ang. In this ceremony, they are awarded bravery medals for their performance on August 11th. The Philippines boasts a rich seafaring history as a result of its archipelagic geography and strategic location in Southeast Asia. Filipino seafaring traditions predate Spanish colonization, with evidence of extensive trade networks and shipbuilding skills dating back centuries, if not millennia. So, Alex, tying into that, the idea of Filipino seamanship and essentially how the crew outsmarted the Chinese. So take a look at this. This is from U2UB891, who says, "I'm so tired of the misinformation about how the Philippines outsmarted the Chinese ships. The destroyer was clearly trying to prevent World War III from happening by sacrificing itself to protect the Philippine ship." So if you would like to comment on that. Also, I do have to say that Tony Hu, also a former Pentagon official, said that the Navy ship actually chased the Philippine Coast Guard for an hour after the collision.
Exactly.
So let's have a look now at the diagram that you have shared with us. And if you want to explain what that diagram shows.
The Chinese Coast Guard cutter, maneuver, first from the left and then to the right. However, I guess, based on our knowledge, that they have done that twice, but unsuccessfully. So it was the accident occur, with the third attempt. Yes, still the Chinese Coast Guard cutter is much bigger, and the maneuverability is not as fast and flexible as the Filipino craft.
So you're saying it was an incident, it wasn't a deliberate protection of the Philippine ship?
Oh, come on, Yeah, you can make up stories.
We're looking forward to the August 1 medal, the Bai medal that they get from Xi Jinping for his bravery, but I doubt that'll be the case, as Alex said.
Yeah.
Right, and actually, I think as Alex had mentioned, in fact, it would be the opposite. I mean, why would the Chinese Navy deliberately crash into its own Chinese Coast Guard, knowing, surely it would know that at that speed there would be severe injuries, if not death. And that, in fact, now, behind closed doors within the CCP, I think your expression was the hammers are out. What's your, take on that, Derek, after years, decades in Asia?
Yeah, well, it's more of, I'm not a Navyman, but I mean, but...
In terms of their culture.
In the Navy culture, I mean, if you run aground, if you hit a sandbar, you're drummed out. You basically are demoted as a captain and you're drummed out of the military, out of the Navy. So crashing into your own vessel on the high seas, I'd hate to be that guy. So I don't think he's going to get a Bai medal. I think he's going to get much worse at some point, quietly, as a PRC tends to do things.
Yeah, away from the media. Now, let's briefly touch on the reason China insists on controlling Scarborough Shoal. It falls within Manila's 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone, but China aggressively asserts sovereignty over it and most of the South China Sea, which includes Manila's West Philippine Sea, as part of Beijing's 10-dash line. In 2012, the year Xi Jinping came to power, China seized Scarborough Shoal from the Philippines and has tightly patrolled it ever since. However, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague ruled in 2016 that the waters around Scarborough Shoal were the traditional fishing grounds for both China and the Philippines. Alex, China's control of Scarborough Shoal, it's about its strategic location. Can you explain to us, that it's also part of this strategic triangle, I understand, for the CCP, but why does it relate to Taiwan?
Well, basically, I think if you look at the map of the South China Sea, the parallels, it's between Hainan and Vietnam in the west, and the Spratlys in the south, and Scarborough Shoal to the east, closer to the Philippines. That strategic triangle actually, when Chinese put Navy and air assets on these islands and built up their military facilities and built an airstrip, they could, from 3 points, they could project their power against any shipping that within the northern part of the South China Sea, in a sense, to effectively control the air and sea in the South China Sea. And if China can fully control the triangle and it controls the northern part of the South China Sea, they could stop Taiwan's energy shipping from a position far, far away from Taiwan.
So in effect, Derek, part of that blockade, possible blockade of Taiwan, is it also so that if there are any US ships or Philippine ones for that matter coming from the EDCA sites in the Philippines, that they'd be able to monitor or block their movement?
Absolutely. I think you have to think about this as one theater now. There's not just a Taiwan theater and a South China Sea theater, or even an East China Sea, or around Japan. It is a single theater in the mind of the Chinese. And therefore, as you both have stated, this is very strategic territory. The blockade scenario, the strangling scenario, I think you have to recognize the PRC seeks to win without fighting. They want to show that, okay, you're strangled, Taiwan, you have to just cry uncle, you have to give in. And our job is to demonstrate that their strangling is not going to work. And that we have access, we'll continue to have access, and Taiwan has options.
Okay. Now, because we're privileged to be joined by a former US ambassador to Myanmar, we want to discuss China's power play in that country and what impacts it has for the rest of the region as well as the US. So, Derek, we know that Myanmar is rich in rare earth metals, which of course is crucial for weapons as well as smart devices and technologies. The question is, can Myanmar leverage this kind of power in terms of the richness of the resources? Both the US and China want some of this.
Yeah, well, I think everyone, probably people watching, recognize that these rare earths, these critical minerals are important for military applications, for AI, for all the most important technologies of the 21st century. China has 90% or refines 90% of these things. So they have a real grip on the refinement and the reprocessing. But Myanmar, right next door, has 60% of China's market for this. So the problem for all of us is that it's not controlled by, well, not the problem, but it's not controlled by a central authority. It's not as if, say, because there's a civil war there, the junta that is taken over at the center does not have control of its borders. And so it's controlled by ethnic groups that are fighting, long fought, the central government. So it's a matter of getting access in very hilly, very difficult terrain along the border between China and Myanmar. And unfortunately, China has most of the advantage there. They have long-standing ties, not necessarily great ties, but they have all the lines of communication, the roads, the infrastructure. So there's some thought in the United States, well, Myanmar is important, they have rare earths, let's go in there and compete with China there. But we take a long time to develop the infrastructure to get this stuff, not only mined, it's being mined by Chinese as well, but to get it out. So there are a lot of problems of Chinese influence inside Myanmar, and that's just one disadvantage that I think the democratic world has.
And do you think that the Trump administration could be kind of structured so that it could operate with all these multiple, groups, as you said?
Yeah, no, we could. It's difficult. In each of them, there are multiple groups. And they all, the Kachin is one of them. I don't know if your viewers know of the Kachin, but we actually worked with the Kachin during World War II to defend the Republic of China back in the 1940s. Okay. So they're very close to us, but they are in the hills and right up against it on the border with the PRC.
Is that the group that China has actually pressured recently in terms of China needing that fighting to stop so that its flow of rare earth metals continues? They've
pressured a number of different groups on this. Kachin, one of them, yes, they are. There's even a bigger challenge beyond the rare earths that I think you could do a whole show on this. I think it would be interesting for folks. But the Chinese have pretty much the terrain to themselves in Myanmar right now. The people of Myanmar do not like China, not like the Chinese. They've lived on that border and they recognize the Chinese do not care about them, want to extract the resources and don't want to give anything back. But what they want is to make them into part of their sphere of influence. It is basically a harbinger of what China is seeking for the region. And they want access to the Indian Ocean, which is of concern to our Indian friends and others there. They want the oil and gas, the resources, et cetera. So this is very important to watch of how the Chinese are operating inside Myanmar. And it's something that not just the United States, but others in the region need to be working much more smartly together to not only do right by the Myanmar people, who should not be operating because of China's desires, but to protect their own sovereignty and their own interests.
How open are they to working with the US, do you think, in comparison to China?
The region's the Myanmar people are very open to the U.S. They're fighting a civil war against the military junta, so they're focused particularly on getting humanitarian aid and getting support for that fight, which is hard enough. So that fight has to stop, and the people of the country have to get their rights back. But if the people were able to have a say in their own futures, they would be leaning towards the United States. They can't choose the United States. They have to live with China. They'll get along with China. But if they choose democracy and these values, which they would if given the opportunity, that makes us a natural ally of ours. And I think it creates a much more stable place in the crossroads of Asia, the country that links a dynamic South Asia with a dynamic Southeast Asia. And I think that's very important for Taiwan and for India and a lot of countries, all of ASEAN, Southeast Asia, that we get this right, and therefore we need to be working together much more smartly about a common approach to end the war and to try to balance the influence of malign powers on Myanmar's border.